Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the Sedra of Vayikra. And we also mark the beginning of the month of Nisan, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which is going to be Wednesday night and Thursday. And we are dedicating our learning, especially in these times, as the people in the land of Israel are facing acute danger, and we are davening for the safety and protection from Hashem of all of the people, all of the Jewish people, wherever they are, and especially in the land of Israel, and for the safety and success of the IDF and the US Army forces who are involved in this battle against evil. And as we look unusually at the Haftorah, we don't normally get a chance to see that. We can see the connections, the way that the themes of the coming festival of Pesach are woven together into this time of year that always brings emanations, always brings the vibes of redemption, of Geula, just as miraculously we were taken out of Egypt and redeemed then. We have the potential each and every time as this time of year comes round that we have that same capacity and that same possibility. And first, if we look at the Haftorah and then look at the themes of the Sedra, and then see how we are all being called up. And at the moment, this is taking a very literal form, as many no longer soldiers or reserve soldiers in the IDF have received call-up notices, and they are going to join their units, many of them going up north to Lebanon and wherever they might be needed. And how all of this is part of our story, how all of this is really showing us how our story continues from the earliest times, from the Exodus from Egypt, and how we have our mission, we have our calling, we are all being called up, we are all being called upon to do our bit to contribute in whatever way we can to the safety and success of all of the people. And please God, all of the wounded should have a refuah sheleima, a complete recovery, and refuah sheleima for Rivka Yittel bas Rochel. And if we look starting at the Haftorah, and unusually this Haftorah is very often read together with the Sedra of Vayikra. Around this time of year, the Haftorahs, the Haftorahs that normally go with the relevant Sedras are not read, because it will either be the Shabbos before Purim, or one of the Shabbos Shekalim, or the other special Shabboses that happen around this time of year before Purim and between Purim and Pesach. But the only time that the Haftorah of Vayikra is not read is when it is the Shabbos before Purim, which would be Shabbos Zachar, or if Rosh Chodesh actually falls, if the first day of the month is actually on Shabbos. So mostly we will read this Haftorah from Yeshaya, and that is Yeshaya chapter 43, verse 20, begins verse 21. And the opening words are Am zu yotzarti, li tehilosi yisaperu. This people that I formed, that I created, to me they will relate my praise. And when we think about the concept of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the retelling of the Exodus of Egypt, this, when we are reading this Haftorah just around the time of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we are showing that we are connecting our historical origins, our coming out of Egypt. We are continuing to relate the story of our Exodus and see how it continues throughout our national life. And this is an ongoing story, and we each have our part in this story, and we each have our own unique contribution to make in this story. And then when we look at the themes of the Sedra and the book of Vayikra, and think about the word Vayikra itself, and the concept of being called upon, called up, and this is something that is said very specifically to Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's a sign of affection, it's a sign of the special love that Hashem has for Moshe Rabbeinu. Yet this calling is something that we can all tune into, the frequency that is being expressed, that term, that Hashem calling out to us. We said last week that there were clouds of uncertainty, the clouds of difficult times in our life, in our personal lives, in our communal lives, national lives, yet that those clouds are never able to cancel out the truth or the essence that is concealed, but that essence is very much there. And when we think about the contents of the Sedra and the book of Vayikra, many people feel that the main subject matter really is about the korbanos, what we call the offerings. Official notice that the word sacrifice is something that I avoid, because I think it conjures up notions of self self-effacement and in a very negative way. Yes, when we are bringing this korban, it is an offering. When we look at the root of the word korban, which is an offering, when we're bringing various different kinds of offerings, which are described in this week's Sedra, they are a vehicle for us to come closer to Hashem. And even though today we may not understand the concept of animal offerings, and we can still understand that really when we read the verses of the Torah, there is a way of relating to what is being described, the mitzvahs that are being talked about here, and to understand how they can apply through all times. And we actually find this written in the Sedra when we look at chapter 3, first of all, verse 11, and it says, V'hiktiru haKohen hamizbecha lechem ishe laHashem. The Kohen shall cause it to go up in smoke on the mizbeach, on the altar. Lechem, it is literally bread. Ishe laHashem, a fire offering to Hashem. And this concept of lechem is that we have, this is as if the staple of life, an essential food for Hashem. This is how the Torah is describing the korbanos. And then again, even though we have been unfortunately without Beis Hamikdash and without these particular mitzvahs for more than 2,000 of years, we have the pasuk at the end of chapter 3, pasuk 17, Chukas olam ledorosechem, an eternal decree for your generations, b'chol moshvosechem, in all your dwelling places. And aspects of this divine service that we read about in Vayikra are applicable for all times. So how can we understand that? How can we relate to something that we have no experience of, that doesn't really that isn't something that we encounter in our lives today? And if we look at the different categories of offerings, of korbanos that are described in this week's Sedra, we can see that, first of all, as part of the service, we have water that is used on the Mizbeach. And water is an inanimate object. And then we have the meal offerings that are made from grain. And this represents the vegetation of the levels of existence. And then we have the various animals that are brought as korbanos, that are brought as offerings. And this represents the animal life. And then we have the human involvement in the rituals of the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash. And although there are many mitzvahs that apply to Jewish people, and Jewish people are going to be bringing these offerings, there were opportunities for non-Jewish people to bring offerings as well. Famously, at the time of Sukkot, we have the 70 nations bringing their offerings, and also specifically we have the human involvement of the Leviim, of the Levites, and of the Kohanim, of the priests. And all of this is showing how all of the levels of creation are participating in this activity. And what we are doing, we are taking part of the creation, the fabric of the universe. Every component has its particular role to play, and we are raising it, we are lifting it up, and then a fire from heaven comes and consumes these offerings. And what we have is the fusion, the bringing together, the elevation of the physical and the bringing down of the divine presence into the world. And when we think, going back to the word of Vayikra, of this concept of calling, and just like Hashem is calling out to Moshe Rabbeinu, we interestingly enough, in the very famous prayer Adon Olam, we have the first two lines, Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, the master of the universe, who has ruled before everything was created. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li Eis Nasa B'chefza Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra. At the time of when the action was done, then his name was pronounced as king. And the form of the verb that is used is nikra, was called, which is a passive form, with very fond memories of my biblical Hebrew teacher of blessed memory, and Miss Naomi Wiesenberg, that she was then. And she really engraved these principles so deeply into us. And it doesn't seem right that there is a passive verb that is connected to Hashem. And we have the idea that Hashem is, as it were, waiting for us to perform our mission, our very unique goal, and the tasks that we have been created to perform. And when we do that, then we are, as it were, calling out to Hashem. And that is just like the heavenly fire that comes down and joins, consumes those, as a sign of acceptance, consumes the special offerings that we are bringing in Vayikra. That so too, that when we are performing our mission, our task, making the world a better place, then Hashem's name is proclaimed as king. And that is a moment that, as it were, Hashem is waiting for. That is bringing the purpose of creation to fruition. And at this time of year, the build up to Pesach, the high point of acknowledging Hashem as creator of all the universe, and specifically of giving us our historic mission of coming out of Egypt, telling the story so we keep those memories alive and we pass them on from one generation to the next in the most brilliant, educationally effective way to transmit these messages. If we think about the Seder night, that is something that attracts so many people. We have all of the senses engaged in retelling this story and in adding our stories. And how many more chapters can we add to this story as we continue our journey from that point of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and we listen to our calling, and we hear that we have been called up, and we are, each of us, able to do something to respond to that call. And I think especially as we face these times and we are able to link the themes of the HaTorah, the themes of this book of Vayikra, that although in its tangible form, and if you look at certain references in the Sedra, and certainly especially the fourth section, Revi'i, if you look at the descriptions of the various animal parts that are on the altar, it sounds perhaps more like something that could be in a zoology textbook, the way each of the internal organs is described. And perhaps that's a moment to reflect on the difference between us as human beings with a soul, with a potential, with a mission, and those animals that are brought as korbanos. And this is something that we can use to ensure that we are elevating ourselves beyond the flesh and blood, beyond the components that sound so much like the components in our own body that are on the mizbeach, that are on the altar. But we have been given a higher status, a higher mission, and we don't want to sink down to those components that are essentially flesh and blood. We have the capability to be so much more. And please God, all of our prayers should be answered. Please God, Yisrael should have the blessings and the salvation from Hashem that we so desperately need. And everybody should hear their calling. Everybody should be called up to do their bit and to ensure that this happens. Thank you very much for listening. Wishing everybody Chodesh Tov.